12th, 1994. Tonight is going to be a dinner honoring the pilots of Operation Jericho. There was a painting depicting the raid on the prison at Amiens, France, and we're going to meet the pilots tonight. There was a announcement by Bader Galleries, and that's where I'm going to go, and we'll film it tonight and meet some interesting people. Should be a lot of fun.
He gets 5%, you know, just one. It's just one architect. No, well, I don't know where he's from now. But he's out. He is out here now. But he hasn't always been here.
Shell, but I know one. They're not.
You're being caught. Bud Marin.
There.
And Virginia Bader.
Oh, come on.
You heard it.
We're talking books.
And we're going to try to get our hands on some books, too.
Yes. And
We're trying to get Bud's book. They've reprinted Bud's book.
And it was reprinted by Time Life, and their distribution system is just horrible, just absolutely horrible. I can't understand it. But they're big enough so they lose a little money. They don't care. That's how they get right on.
I can't believe that yesterday I didn't know any of these people. And today they are old friends, and we are all very, very proud of who they represent and where they're from and what they did for all of us in World War II and ever since that. It sort of takes me back. I haven't had as good a day or enjoyed myself as much with nice people since I met Virginia Bader or my beloved Bud Murray, who's a real hero in everybody's eyes. But I must say that you have made a real hit with this crowd, and you would make a real hit with any group that you were in. I am very, very proud to have met every one of you, and God bless you, and God love you, and Godspeed back. Thank you.
Here, here.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Rayner, for those who haven't met me before. And I really don't have an accent, all you guys do.
You're from Brooklyn, we know.
I'd like to welcome everybody here to the Country Inn at Newport Beach. And trust everybody had a good time at Virginia Land today next door. And I guess my part in all this is a chaperone, I guess, for Squadron Leader Ian McQuitchie, Squadron Leader Brian Hannafin, and Flying Officer Bob Fowler.
John, tell them a bit about how you put the print together.
Yes, I guess I'm responsible for you all having to spend $65 a head tonight to all of this thing, so I guess you're owed some sort of an explanation. It goes back some years. I was actually living in the United States for a couple of years, and I was unfortunate enough to meet Virginia Bader and get the hook put in, so to speak, and started collecting aviation art before I went back to live in Australia. And over the years I collected many wonderful prints which were adorned with autographs of heroes of years gone by and are still in my own mind. And I decided that there was a couple of particular events that needed some recognition. And I had read something over the years about the Amiens prison raid and realised that the Australians and New Zealand aircrew, as well as the Canadians, British, French, and I think even a Belgian were involved with. And I read on with some interest and decided it was time that some of these people living in the Southern Hemisphere had some of the recognition that was long owed to them. And approximately 18 months ago, I was fortunate enough to meet Ian McRitchie. Dropped in for 5 minutes, and 3 or 4 hours later sort of left with a great wad of books under the arm and pat on the head and sort of, read these, boy, and come back and see me next week. At that particular stage, I started talking to Virginia about commissioning a painting, and we were kicking around the idea of the amion thing, and sort of thought, well, gee, who can we get that paints mosquitoes pretty well? And I'd seen some earlier paintings of Gerald Coulson's, and we made the decision to approach Gerald to do the original painting for us. And the initial thought was to get the Australian, New Zealand survivors near my own home to autograph the original prints in recognition. After reading on for some time and discussing further details with Ian, and then I was fortunate enough to meet Wing Commander Bob Iredale, who led the Australians on the trip. Then I think Christmas before last, I was in Adelaide and went and visited Squadron Leader Brian Hannafin. I had enough contacts at that stage where I was being introduced to people overseas in the UK and New Zealand. So on the telephone, and sort of $15,000 or $20,000 later with the telecom man, I was off to England to commission my painting that I had no idea what it was going to look like, or the finished product would even sort of come up to. Whilst I was away at that particular time, both Ian and Brian had introduced me to many people overseas via telecom and the mail service. And while I was actually in the UK, before I knew it, I was meeting just about everybody that was involved in the trip. After interviewing those people and getting information for the commission, I sort of casually, coyly asked those people if they'd be involved and make this a real 50th anniversary effort. And hence we managed to contact every survivor of the raid that is living today, including 2 of the Frenchmen that were released by these chaps nearly 50 years ago. One of the quick little stories I will tell you is one particular chap who led the New Zealanders is a wing commander, Irving Stanley, known as Black Smith. I was trying to contact him and had some trouble, and was talking to one of the well-known British aviation historians, a fellow by the name of Christopher Shawes. And Christopher assured me that Blacksmith was not possible to get to. He doesn't talk to anybody, he's a total recluse. So I thought, well, he's one of the interesting people we'd like to get involved. So I was having a chat to Ian, another one of these 5-minute sessions, and I think I was there 2.5 hours this time, and I noticed Ian glanced at his watch and picked up an address book out of his bottom left-hand drawer in his office, and looked up the numbers and decided we'd go for the telephone. I said, what are you up to? He said, oh, well, it must be about 8 a.m. in the UK. I said, oh, okay. So he put the telephone onto speaker and promptly dialed this number, and it rang at the other end, and this voice came on and said something like 40421369. And Ian said, is that you, Smithy? I said, yes. He said, it's Ian McRitchie here. He said, oh, Mac, how are you, old boy? We chatted on for some 15 or 20 minutes on the telephone, and Ian eventually sort of said, well, look, I'd like to introduce you to somebody. John Rayner would like to come over and chat to you about Operation Jericho. And Smithy's words were, oh dear, not another one. No, it was an interesting reaction, but we chatted on for some time, and eventually he agreed to see me, hence the prints signed by Smith today. And once Ian hung up, I said to Ian, how long has it been since you've spoken to Smith? He said, 49 years or so. So that is just an example of what some of these people have done to help me with this particular project. All of the people have extended themselves. Bob Fowler, to help with the signing, came from his home in New Zealand all the way to Melbourne, Australia, so that we wouldn't have to lug 1,000 odd prints to New Zealand, go through customs, set up, bear all of the expenses, etc. And as I say, through Bob's good nature, Brian's contacts, Ian's, we now have a print which I believe would be the only limited edition, regular limited edition print with as many signatures as we have on the Operation Jericho print, which includes people from New Zealand, Australia, Canada, the United Kingdom, and France. So today we have that particular print, which you've all generously purchased, because it's not just a print to sell on a commercial basis that's going to pay the bills, but it's actually been able to fund the return of the veterans from overseas back to England and then on to Amiens for the 50th anniversary of this historic raid. So I do thank you sincerely, and would like to formally introduce you to our guests of honour, Squadron Leader Ian McRitchie, over here on my left. Ian, if you would. In the centre here, Brian, if you would, please. And Flying Officer Bob Fowler over on my right. I'm going to totally embarrass them now, even though they've talked enough all day today, and ask them if they would come up one at a time and see if we could dig an old story out of the archive somewhere that may entertain people for a few minutes, and then let you people, as I say, who have so kindly agreed to come along tonight, ask some questions if you wish. Thank you again. Good night.
Who's going to volunteer to be first?
Bob, how about you?
Sure.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Well, the New Zealanders won the toss to bomb the prison, and we were allocated the wards, which was it was a toss-up, and we won the toss. So the New Zealanders were first in. There were 3 on the east wall and 3 on the north wall. The 3 on the east wall were led by Wing Commander Smith, Jennings and Sparks. And on the north wall, we were led by Captain Cannafin, who is here tonight, and Merv Darrell, who unfortunately cannot be here tonight. Merv had a stroke about a couple of years ago and could not come. So Titch and I are the only 2 from the North Wall. Perhaps I should tell you a little bit about the day on which the raid was made. It was a real winter's day with snowstorms, and the visibility was very low, the cloud base was low. We were called to the briefing room, I'm not sure what time, but early in the morning, and when we got to the briefing room, guards were on the door and we were asked to produce our identity form. I'm not sure the number now, but 1080 or 1050, I'm not sure. We knew something different was up. We went in and there was the model of the prison under wraps, and it was unwrapped, and I think it was Basil Embry, they told us that the idea of the raid was to release the French resistance fighters who were imprisoned at Amiens. They were due to be shot, I think the next day or within a couple of days. The idea of the raid was to open up the prison and release these resistance workers. We studied the model of the prison and after various ones had addressed us and Wing Commander Pickard, or at least Group Captain Pickard, he said that it was a death or glory job, boys, and if you make a good job of it, do the best job that you have ever done. Boys, so anyhow, we took off and 11 o'clock I think it was, and the weather was still atrocious, and we took off, and to keep formations was very hard, and we got to the British south coast, the weather cleared, and we crossed the channel low level until we got close to the coast. We climbed the tent at 5,000 feet to get over the Ak fire at that stage. We did that occasionally sometimes we went in at low level, but in this case we climbed the tent 5,000 feet. Then France was a picture, it was covered in snow, and then we went down to deck level and carried on our dog leg. Our route had been planned by group headquarters. We followed that route, and the first wave we came to Albert and turned, and down the road was the prison. The first group of Smith, Jennings and Sparks, they bombed and carried on over the prison. Titch had been hit on the way in and wounded, and there was only Darrell and I left. We did a slight half circuit and went over the prison, bombed our wall. We had to fly 200 miles an hour, and below the level of the prison wall, which was 20 feet high and 3 feet thick. The idea was to drop our bombs just before we pulled over the wall. Merv and I did this and pulled up over the prison, did a circuit, and were on our way home. The Australian squadron were coming in after us, and perhaps I should let Ian McRitchie tell you about the Australian side of the story. But once we had bombed, done our circuit, we headed for home. And I would have liked to watch the Australians go on, but discretion is a better part of that. Well, thank you very much. I'd just like to thank John Rayner for bringing us over here. We appreciate it very much. And to
Virginia.
My story is that what Bob said, of course, is quite true of what did happen on the raid. But what I'd like to say first is that I wasn't going to come over here, but sometime in November, Virginia received from John Rayner, through the fax machine, I think, a draft of the painting and what it was going to be like. And I think a list of names where I was a maybe that I might come. 2 days later, Butler Hewan rang me and said, "What do you mean you're not coming? You've got to come." And that's the main reason I'm here is because of Bud. Yes, what happened, Bud and I, of course, knew one another when he arrived in England, and we became very good friends. And unfortunately, we met quite frequently. He'd often come down to see me sometimes at Wittering, which was his first unit. And then when he went to, I thought it was Halesbury, wasn't it? I'd often visit him there, and occasionally I was a test pilot and then a farmer. He'd come down and visit me. And his last visit, just on Christmas Day, I think it was, in 1943, we'd arranged to have dinner together in London a few weeks later. Unfortunately, meanwhile, I got posted to 464 Squadron, and Bud lost touch with me, and I was that busy. I was only there 1 month before this raid, and I finished up, as you know, a prisoner. And a few weeks later, Bud finished up. Well, he wasn't a prisoner. He got knocked down, or knocked himself down, I think. Whatever, Holland, wasn't it, Bud? France. France, yeah. That's right. But he did the right thing and managed to get his way back to England. And of course, anybody that's come down and they helped out of Europe and got back to England, they didn't fly again in that theatre of operations. And Bud went back to America. We weren't to meet again until about 20 years ago, when he was sent over to Australia to assist somebody who the government let in, a Como journalist who'd interviewed Bud when he was prisoner in Korea. And I think the case went all right, didn't it, Bud? You were able to prove it.
Yes.
And this Como journalist was having one of our senators up on a case of libel, but he didn't win the case. So obviously the man was libellous. I think that's right, isn't it, Bud?
Yeah.
Well, fortunately, I saw in the papers where this American colonel had come out to Australia to help defend the case with a Hollywood beauty queen, it said, as his wife. And I managed to get in touch, and he came down to see me at Melbourne on a day when the court wasn't sitting, which was very nice, and off again the next morning. And I welcome this opportunity to see Bud, of course, once again. It's my first trip to America, but it won't be my last. I'll be coming again as soon as I can. I really enjoyed it. I don't think I should say much more. You've heard enough about the raid, I think. But thank you very much.
Does anybody have any questions? Anybody want to ask anything at the end?
How when you came down, they found you right away, you crashed in the snow, and they captured you right away?
That's right. Well, what happened, of course, I was badly injured on the right leg and the right arm, forward and that. And I laid in the snow for a while, but they crept up on me, and they'd been shooting at me anyway. The bullets were missing. I'd collapsed in the snow and decided that was the safest place with all this wild shooting going on. And they crept up with machine guns and all this sort of thing. And when they saw that I was laying huddled and bleeding everywhere, they just picked me up and took me to a field dressing station in a hospital in a village near the spot where I came down. And then the next day I was shifted on the train, and the train pulled in at Armyong, and then I went to the Armyong hospital. And some Hitler Youth chaps were on the ambulance, and a couple of them spoke English, and they questioned me what sort of planes did I fly. Well, being in Armyong, I flew Spitfires then. The question, they asked me a bit about Spitfires and that, which I was able to answer. But they operated I was well treated by the medical people anyway, and finished up in a ward with 3 or 4 American bomb aimers, gunners, and one or two pilots.
Tell them about Hub Zemke, because they
And
all
one-
know Hub Zemke.
Stefan?
I said they all know Hub Zemke. Tell them about how when he came.
Oh, right, yeah, I will in a minute, yes. I'll tell you about the Americans in the war. There was one French-Canadian also who was a Typhoon pilot that had been shot down on the road. Doesn't matter now. I finished up in prison camp up in the Baltic, and just towards the end of 1944, I think early 45, of course, Zemke turned up, and that's right. Fortunately, Virginia got him on the phone yesterday. It was quite nice to speak to him again, because fortunately he came in. He was the top officer in the prison camp, and it was nice that I knew him. Very few of the others did, the English people running it. No, it was very nice to speak to him yesterday. Thanks very much. I think I've said enough, unless anybody has some questions, or I can put a question that you all haven't asked. What really was the cause of the raid, or the principle behind it all? And I don't think this is understood very well by a lot of people. And I think the main thing I should say is that, of course, as you know, Britain lost most of its forces and a lot of its strength went when the French collapsed, and they did their best at Dunkirk to get the men out, but had to leave a lot of equipment behind. And then it was a battle. The Battle of Britain was about to start, and even some of Churchill's comments on that it was a battle they had to win, or else the Germans would invade England. And if they invaded England, there was the likelihood of spurring further south and the invasion of America. And I think he had a good ally in Churchill that helped, did his best to help, but was hindered, of course, by the isolationists. You always have isolationists, and you have to put up with them, but what was to happen, they gradually built up the force, and the best thing that happened in 42, of course, no, I'm not going to come into Pearl Harbor yet, but rather the fact that Hitler was indulged to turn on the Russians and attack them. And that took a lot of the pressure off England. And then the other one was, of course, the mistake the Japanese made with Pearl Harbor, that was something they were to regret. Because this proved the point that Roosevelt was right, what he was doing, the help he was giving England, and it showed that it was quite justified what he had been doing to help. And from then on, of course, there came the build-up of getting back into Europe to overtake Germany. And the forces were built up, of course, very strongly, and the planning for it, I think, was done by America in 42. Well, late 42 anyway, after Pearl Harbor. In 43, it was very strong, and certainly it was all planned under Eisenhower to take place when it did in June 1944. Now, what was happening then, because of this enormous build-up in England for the invasion, the Germans had strengthened their Gestapo forces in Holland, Belgium and France. And they were raping in great numbers of the resistance people, and mainly, of course, by anybody they captured, they were tortured, even when they were in the resistance or not. And a few of them were talking, and they were rounding up too many and weakening the resistance movement and the ability of the resistance workers there to carry out what they would like to do. And this it put a strain that worried the Allies, that certainly in America, the intelligence anyway, were worried that the resistance wouldn't be as strong as they would like it for the invasion to help destroy the transport system and what had been planned. Now, what happened was the roundup had increased enormously, where a lot of the resistance workers were being locked up in jails, killed and shot. And that's certainly the situation with the jail at Amiens, where a number of them were to be shot on the Friday or the Saturday, and some of them were the key men in the resistance movement. So the French, of course, got on to England. It went to Churchill first and into the head of their ministry. And fortunately, the people that specialised in the work was 2nd Tactical Air Force, and they got on to Basil Embry. And that was done only some 6-7 days before the actual raid. Embry had his own unit and a lot of his own men, and his own, in some ways you could say, his own air force. That's the way he'd set it up. And the planning was all done in a matter of 3 or 4 days, and some of it you've heard about the model, you know about it all. And the cruise and that, of course, as you all know now, it was all done with just a few hours' notice, the whole raid. And it was reasonably successful. Thanks very much. Oh, any questions? I'll just answer my own question.
What was the toughest part about being a prisoner for over a year?
It was pretty thin for a start. As I say, I was in the Hospital Army Hall, and then they got me off to Frankfurt on Main, and I was, I think, 5 weeks there in a confined, in a cell, solitary confinement, and fed on a couple of slices of bread for breakfast, a bowl of vegetables called soup for lunch, and 2 slices of bread for my evening meal, and trying to heal the wounds, in my arm and leg. And the interrogators weren't getting anywhere, and I think it was after they'd had me 6 weeks, they gave up, and I was released. But the treatment, they used all the threats they could, but I'd been well trained in what you do when you're taken prisoner. And I think they realised after a while that if you're difficult, they're only wasting their time. Not only that, anything you know is getting old news. It's not much help to them. And the longer you can stand out, of course, the style of the news is that you might impart your talk. But whilst they used all sorts of threats, they never carried anything out. But I heard methods that the British used. I'll tell you some of them too, Virginia, what they did. The Battle of Britain. Yeah, they got Germans, and they weren't very helpful. They're talking, they said, well, you'll have to undergo an operation, and the knife might slip. Then you won't be able to bear your children anymore, or something like that. Well, the British pulled all the tricks they could. They still stuck to the Geneva Convention, and it went back to making threats.
Ian, question. Tell everybody, if you would, after your departure from the jail till you were knocked down. I think it's a most interesting story, quite a remarkable landing, as we call it. Would you please just go through that before you finish up? When you're on the way out from the prison, before you were knocked down? No, when you're exiting from the prison, going out via Platt, and when you flew into the gun batteries, the flak.
Oh, yes.
It's quite... I'll let you take it from there, what actually happened, your wounds and how you actually...
I dealt with it briefly before.
Oh, I wasn't here then.
Sorry. No, I dealt with it. So it puzzled me a bit. But it's when I was shot down, I mean.
Yes.
No, I think I hope I did.
You did skim over it till you were actually captured, getting out of the aircraft. I think it's of interest how you actually handled yourself and how the aircraft actually got down.
Well, I did it, and I cut it a little bit short, maybe, what I was saying, but what happened, of course, after we bombed the jail, we turned and headed for home, and of course, being a fighter, I like to fly low and pick up a bit of German transport on the way back, but it happened a couple of times on the way back. And unfortunately, with the snow on the ground and that, I went right into a gun battery of 9 guns, and just saw the guns blinking because they were well camouflaged in the snow. And I happened to fire on the middle battery, but I couldn't get all of them because there wasn't time, only a mile away, and you're covering a mile in something just over 12 seconds, you see, and there was very little time to get another one, but just as we went over the top, a shell struck the side of the fuselage, and all I got was a loud bang, and lifted my right hand off the control column, put it on my left, because blood was just pouring out of the sleeve. The same with my right foot, that was rather inoperative, and so was the right eye, because I fractured a flap all around the eye and in the eye, and a bad cut on the head, was skirting blood on the windscreen. Now, I also never go to Samson in New Zealand to try and stop the bleeding. There was no answer, and as I looked around to see what was wrong, he fell dead on the floor. I decided then, I thought, well, I've got about 20 or 30 seconds to live. And I couldn't bail out anyway. The safest thing is, just to land with the wheels up in a paddock. Now, what's interesting, I suppose, about this, and a bit I should tell, when I started flying Miles Masters in England for training, I was practicing forced landings one day, and the horn was blowing every time it came down low, and I went back to the airplane, the horn blew, and I came in and landed. Well, they put a mark in my logbook, but it said careless faulty, faulty cockpit drill or something. And then the same thing happened about 6 months later. I was flying Bolton Paul to Pines, and we had a very good party in the mess one night. Bud will tell you what sort of party. And the next morning I was flying, I hadn't quite recovered from the party, and I think I put the flaps down twice and missed the wheels. And this time there was no noise when we came into the aerodrome. When it hit the ground at the belly, the horn blew, and so you landed with your wheels up. That cost me a trip up to the AOC commanding the area. Now, by the time I come back now to when this hand was useless and I had to do a forced landing, I was very experienced at this. And it was very easy with just one arm, left arm working and all that. All I did was just plonked it down on the ground. And it's the easiest way to land an aeroplane. I got badly shaken up in it, and I think I did my best to get out, couldn't set it on fire, and just left it. And then hobbled off in the snow, and the Germans started shooting at me, and I just collapsed in the snow. And I stayed there for I don't know how long, but I thought I was going to bleed to death, but I didn't. The amazing thing is that your arteries can be cut. I wasn't to find this out in the years afterwards, or I sort of woke up to it then. You can have your arteries cut, blood pouring out, but the body has the ability to shut off somewhere to stop the flow like that. And if I'd only known that, I might have got back to England. It doesn't matter, the Germans came, I got up a second time, I thought the Germans would have gone away, and that's a silly thing to think of. And then the next time the bullet did just miss me. A couple of whistles past my body and a couple past my head. So I decided I'd get back in the snow again. I got back in the snow and waited, and then the Germans crawled up very cautiously, and they thought I was a dangerous character, but I wasn't very dangerous with all the injuries. And they carted me off to the hospital, of course, and then, as I said before, in the village, and then to Army Old Hospital. I think that's all. Sorry.
Question. During the briefing, was there a theory discussed about how the bombs were going to open the doors? Can you discuss that a little bit of the proof?
I can discuss it, or else I know nothing about it. I've only read it in the book. What is over there? All I do know is it was written somewhere in the records that the bombs had been chosen with the explosive power, or the type of blast from the bombs was such that it would cause a shock wave, which they hoped would take the doors out of the building. But I think that needed the right bombs put into the building to achieve that. And I think they could have been the bombs carried by either Iredale or Smith. That's the first New Zealand squadron to bomb that wall, the northeast wall, or the next flight in was, of course, Iredale's flight, which attacked it. See, they were running the full length of the building where their bombs would have gone in. And somebody certainly got some bombs in that did achieve that from the records of it. Now, the only... Sorry. No, it's relevant. I was only going to answer one of my own questions.
I was just asking, going to ask about the bombs themselves with a delayed action fuse, so that if you're flying at that altitude, try and get above, you're going to have some sort of delay, or else the shock waves not take the plane down.
Yeah. That's right. What happened was the bombs used had an 11-second delay, but I believe there are a few bombs mixed in where the delay could have been 1 hour or up to 24 hours. That they put a few of those in just to make it difficult for the Germans to clean up the mess anywhere. they're always the annoying sort of bomb. We were warned that too of the 11-second delay, so that there was just time, and before the next flight went in, you had to make sure that any stuff that had gone up in the air had gone down again before you flew over. You didn't want to be flying through a lot of mud. The bomb going off. You know, don't rush in too soon. The timing was done like that. Trying to think of the one I was going to ask myself about. That's a pretty good one, but
Who did all the navigation, Ian? Like when they were woken up that morning and they were told they were going to do the mission. I mean, how did you know exactly where to go?
what they did was our navigators were all given the same map and the course on it from Hunstanton. It was from Hunstanton we went south slightly on the takeoff. It just tried to reform. Then from there we went round the north of London, missed the barrage balloons via Elstree, turned around over the top of Farnborough and down to Littlehampton. And from Littlehampton across the Channel. And that was the route out, but we were in snow 2 or 3 minutes after we took off, trying to fly in formation, and it wasn't easy. The cloud base over England then was about, over there we were flying, was something I'd say below 1,000 feet, I'm not sure. But when you've got snowstorms in amongst it, it's a bit difficult. But, once it was quite clear, I remember going over Farnborough down to Littlehampton, then it cleared as we crossed the Channel and got much better near the French coast. And over France with a cloud base of somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 feet, I don't remember very well now. Something of that order, and quite nice flying over France. Pretty good, but the route had all been planned, and the nice thing that was chosen, and the thing Basil was very careful about, give the pilots a good run into the target, and that's what he's able to choose on this one, that we went in a roundabout route to get to Amiens, so that we came down the road from Albert to Amiens, and the jail was on that road on that side of the town.
You were really low, weren't you?
You know, it makes it easy then too. The first building you come to is the jail, and all you do is attack it. Now, doing things like this, which was smart, with low-level attacks on something, you know, pick the right route in. Don't worry about the shortest route, but take the sensible one. Well, a lot of pilots did this before the war. You know, we had very few aviation maps then. In Australia, we just used road maps, Vacuum Oil Company, or Shell. And you did your flying like that. You followed a railway line or a road or a river till you arrived where you had to go. And it's old-fashioned, but it's sensible.
Ian, before you leave, you mentioned Bolton Paul Defiant. I don't know, it seems to me that I remember you shot down, or you and your crew shot down 4 enemy airplanes in a Bolton Paul Defiant. And I have not heard you mention what a dog that airplane was.
What I was talking about is when I first went to night fighter squad, all the British could afford then for night fighters was the Bolton Paul Defiant, and there were still a few Hurricanes used for that, because the Bayfighter was just coming along and the Mosquito was just being built for it, that sort of work. And the Defiant was all we had, and it was like a Hurricane or a Mustang, you think of it of, with a gun turret on the top with 4 Brownings. And the job we had, what Bud's talking about, was we're doing either at dawn or dusk, we'd go out to the convoys along the English coast and take over from the day fighters. In this case it was dusk when I went out this afternoon, and got out across the convoy lane. There was no convoy around anywhere anyway, and there were 4 aircraft coming towards me that looked like Blenheims, and it was almost a head-on course. And as I got a bit closer, I said to my gunner, it was the same Samson, the man who was killed on the raid on the jail. This is what the time I'm talking about is September, I think, 1941. And as we got closer to them and they saw me, they split up and they were Ju-88s. Now the Defiant wasn't a match for one Ju-88, but I decided that there was a very good rule that I learnt on the ship going to England from the captain. I said to him when we were crossing the Indian Ocean, what happens if a German submarine comes up? He said, we do what Nelson did, attack the enemy on sight. And that's what I had in mind the first time this is the first German aircraft I'd seen. Well, that's what I did. We managed to shoot one down, and another one was following. It took so long time to catch it because the Ju-88s were faster than the Defiant. But we caught the first one. He used up all his ammunition shooting at me, flew up alongside him and knocked him down. It was the only way he could shoot them down, with no forward guns. And then we engaged the second one, but our guns kept jamming. We'd lose 2 or 3 guns each time they fired a burst. And the gunner was busy trying to clear them, and I'm trying to set myself up an attack on this chap. But the last Ju-88 was a bit smarter. He was a fighter aircraft, and I quite wasn't. And he didn't want me to get alongside him or underneath him, and I couldn't manage it. And we got somewhere over near the Dutch coast, and we only had one gun working. That was time to go back home. That's all I can tell you. We claimed them as damaged, that's all. One destroyed and one damaged. Oh, and then a few weeks later I was out on convoy patrol again. Went up through cloud because things were quiet. It was a cloud base of 1,500 feet, nothing about. Went up through it up to about 8,000, had a look round, there's nothing about there, so I came back again. And I was just getting down there, the water had just broken through, and all of a sudden the gunner said to me, turn left. And I turned left, and the next thing he shot down a twin-engine plane that was about to shoot us down. So one thing that the Defiant was good at, having somebody looking out backwards. But fortunately, just after that, we got mosquitoes, and then it was comparatively easy then to attack Germans when they came over at night, because I've got a couple of Dornier 217s up at 14,000 feet, a different game to what I've been playing with the Defiant. That's all I can say about that, really. Sorry. Yeah, that'll do. I can get them on.
Tell us your little bit about
First of all, I would like to apologise that you've got to put up with me on this thing because I'm a total fraud. People have said, were you on the Amiens raid? I said, yes, and they said, which part of it did you hit? And then I have to say, well, I'm sorry, I never got there. So, from that point of view, I can't give you anything on the raid, the actual attack on the prison itself. But what I would like to do before I forget is to, first of all, thank John for all his incredible research work, his time, energy, in putting all this together and getting us here, and to Virginia, for great generosity to us, and thank you. We appreciate it, and I don't think that this raid would have ever had the publicity it is now getting, which I think is good for it, without people like this. To you I say thank you very much. My part in it was very small. I'd first of all like to say that although they tossed a coin for who went first, it wasn't luck, it was just that the best squadron actually did start. all the part. I've been asked were we specially trained, how were we chosen? As far as I know, we were chosen by whoever the squadron commander thought needed to do some flying, you better get on the trip. I don't think any of us were specially chosen, because all the people in that wing, I think, were probably as good as one another. Lots of training, particularly in the low-level daylight side of this affair. People have asked, how do you bomb at low level? What part does the navigator take? Well, luckily we don't have any of our navigators here, but they didn't do anything. They were to keep the right-hand side down a bit. And you will read in some things this business on this, stories on this raid about the navigator going forward to use his bomb sight. Well, as it was a solid nose, I'm not too sure how it worked. Bomb sight. But we were trained how to do this job merely on experience and a lot of practice. Most of us, I think, had come from similar backgrounds of plenty of low-level flying. My own start in the combat field was with Blenheims on anti-shipping work, and there the object of the exercise there was to put the bombs into the side of the ship, possibly skip them in, and we did virtually the same thing with the Mosquito. Small buildings, you either put it straight into the building or possibly skipped it in. The only trouble with skipping is that, of course, you don't have much control over it if it diverts on the way. Getting back again to the raid itself, people have asked questions which sometimes I think are superfluous, such as, were you frightened? The answer is, of course, no, you were scared stiff. But that, I think, was before you flew. Once you're airborne, I think you're fairly happy with life. You're very busy, and on this occasion, terribly busy, because we were trying desperately to keep in formation. The others have told you all the stories of the weather and of all the conditions that were against us. And all I did, as the leader of the second Vic, was to try and keep my leader in sight. That's Wing Commander Smith. If I lost him, I'm not too sure, but I think I lost him 2 or 3 occasions. All I did was just stick on the same course and hope he appeared soon, but not too close. And we got through the cloud and it was perfectly all right above it. We closed in formation again, and on the way in, weather was good, as we've been told. Somewhere, how far inland I don't know, I had one engine go, decided to be very rough running. I'm not too sure to this day whether it was hit or whether it was a mechanical malfunction, but whatever it was, it wasn't good. Then smoke appeared, and even I was able to work out that after smoke you might get flame and maybe something better be done. So, one thing and another, I had also been informed that this wasn't a day for heroics. If you couldn't keep up or you got lost, don't try and make a heroic single effort on the prison, because everybody else is tightly scheduled and your popularity would probably be pretty low when you came back having crossed right in front of everybody else. So I'm afraid I never got there. I can't tell you what it was like over the prison. I can only tell you the weather was bad on the way out. And I think it was about the fourth occasion that I'd come back on one engine, so I knew perfectly well that the aircraft flew just as well and saved us an awful lot of cost in fuel. I'm an early version greenie. But if you've got any questions, if I can help in that way, I certainly will try and answer them.
You still never found out when you got back if it was MEA fire or malfunction of the one engine that went out. Is that correct?
No, I haven't ever found out, because after I turned back, I signalled my own crew to go ahead, my own number 2 and 3 to go ahead, because what I did was shut down the engine by feathering to start with. Temperatures seemed to come down. I had very rough running engine, that's why I shut it down, and the smoke. And I hoped, quite wrongly, that I'd got over the problem, and maybe when it cooled down I'd try and see if I could do the last 10 minutes or whatever it was with 2 engines. So I did what you're told not to do, restart it. And of course the inevitable happened. After about a minute, a lot more black smoke, and then rather bright flames. So I thought it was time to use the extinguishers. And once you've used those, of course, you've got no chance of starting it up. So I feathered it and turned round. We bombed a crossroads, as far as I remember. It was a pretty heroic undertaking, I can tell you. And there were 11-second delay bombs. I don't know what damage they did, but it was bad. It was better than a drop in the middle of the field. And then at some time when I think I had to do a steep turn somewhere, and obviously I was fairly near a flat position. Sorry, I know what was wrong. I suffer a little from amnesia, as you can see. The problem, I think, was I was having trouble with instruments because I'd lost power on one side, and I think I had forgotten to switch over in some cases. So as I got the max full power again on the instrument section. I then did a turn to get back onto what I hoped was the correct course, and in doing so I was near a flag post, and they said a bit moderately unfriendly and shot the top off the cockpit. Oh. And the air conditioning was pretty intensive. But the other engine, I'm told afterwards, was hit. Well, I wasn't interested whether it was hit or not. If it ran, it was, there was nothing else you could do. So I went back home to England. And that's
a little cold.
A
little cold on the way back.
A little cold, yes. And
a little painful.
Oh yes, gone slightly. You'll see reports, records in some books. I read one of them and immediately applied for the VCN bar. It's turned down, strange enough. They're grossly exaggerated. I was supposed to have been given morphia by my navigator. A wonderful chap who I gather I'm going to see in 2 or 3 days' time. Quite a bit older than myself. He's now 81 plus, maybe 82. I haven't seen him. John tells me he came to London. He's a teetotaler, just like this. And he is very fit, but has had to reduce his 10-mile-a-day walk back to, or 10 kilometres back to 5. He's stone deaf, and so the conversation between himself and myself at this dinner, it's going to be much the same as used to go on in the cockpit. Magnificent bloke, considering his background. If I'm diverting and boring, put your hand up. He was training at an operational training unit where I was on rest, and he had an accident, or his crew crashed, I think at night, and his pilot and his air gunner, this is whilst they were under training, were killed. He was left with a pronounced limp, and I was looking for a crew in order to go back on operations, and we're going back on Venturas. So I needed two air gunners, or air gunner, wireless operator and an air gunner, and a navigator. And obviously Frank couldn't find anybody else because he came up and said to me, I'd like to go with you. But 2.5 years later, he was still with me. So either we worked well or took no notice of one another. I think it was the latter. And that was a slight diversion. He was meant to, according to this thing, I asked him to give me morphia. Well, I may have done something stupid like that. But I said to him, I've got blood running out of one side. So apart from proving that I was still living, I suppose, he said, he looked at it casually and he said, oh no, nothing much. And he stuffed one of these first aid waddings in, which I think was a good idea. Now, if I asked him for morphia, I may have, but he would have had more sense than me. He would know that a few minutes later, I don't know if there's a doctor in here, but I should think I would be fast asleep, more so than normal. And this has persisted, and I've often been asked, what was it like to be sedated with morphia? I don't know. I got back to Ford Airfield with his assistants. Blacksmith whipped past me on the way out, calling me, did I want any help? He hadn't seen me. He turned back, and I think you confirmed that, or John, that he now blames me for the fact that he got hit in turning back. So maybe I should stop my trip here and go back home. I'll stay here. But the journey back was fairly uneventful because he very kindly did slow right down. I was obviously very slow because I thought the remaining engine was working well, but I gathered it wasn't working 100%. But it got us back. We did a normal landing there. Then I was taken to the local, the RAF hospital on sick quarters on the place, where two fairly recent ex-medical students called doctors did a lot of practice and extracted bits of metal. And they explained, I think, why I said to Frank at the time, I don't know what's wrong, but I said, I've got no feeling on this side and excruciating pain. And it's been put down in various reports that I had that side paralysed. Well, I don't think that was it. I get it now. Nothing to do with that. And what it is, I now go to a chiropractor to get it so that I can play golf again. And apparently it's your sciatic nerve trapped. And it is one of the most painful things in the world. And I had it some 18 months ago again. The doctor could do nothing, so I went back to my chiropractor, and between he and I, we solved the problem because I've done it a few times now. I put a piece of rope around my foot. I've advised other people who've got the same trouble. Put your hand in your pocket holding the rope and you pick your foot up. I can tell you with a trapped sciatic nerve, you've got no hope otherwise. But it has got nothing to do with I think, the damage I had there.
Where were you hit from?
Up in the top of the neck. And
Lucky not to be paralyzed.
yes, I was probably lucky not to have been hurt a bit more, but no real damage. And I spent 3 weeks, very pleasant weeks, in Chichester Hospital, where they have very good-looking nurses. Thank you very much for listening. And if you've got any questions, I think Ian's answered most, including his own. The only other thing I would like to tell you is that we very nearly lost him on the journey over here. He had difficulty sleeping, got himself curled up in a corner. This was after, incidentally, he was assisted on board by a rather gorgeous-looking bird, one of the airline staff. And he suddenly developed terrible limp and everything else. But he, John tells me he was rather worried, woke up in the middle of the night, couldn't see Ian. All he could see was something wrapped up in a blanket, rather as though, you know, just before the funeral. He then had a look, and Ian, I think, was finding difficulty in getting a decent place to sort of position to sleep, and I agree with him there, but then found it got terribly cold in the middle of the night, and I noticed this. So he wrapped himself completely up in a blanket. John thought, my God, we're only going to get 2 of them there.
That's great.
I think that's enough of that nonsense.
Bill's going to talk.
I'm Bud Mahiran, and it's been years and years and years that I never thought I'd have the opportunity to see Ian here in this country. Over the years, I've tried to find him, whether any of you know it or not. Senator Barry Goldwater has been a ham radio operator for years and years and years, in fact, ever since I've known him. And I learned a long time ago that Ian's brother was also a ham radio operator. He's not in Melbourne, is he? Your brother?
He died 12, 14 years ago.
But where was he before that?
He was in South Australia.
I used to ask Barry Goldwater if he'd ever heard anybody in Australia named McRitchie on ham radio. And he had, and he knew Ian's brother, and I kept trying to pass word to Ian so we could get in touch with you there, but it was never successful. I wanted to take this opportunity to tell you a little bit about him and my experience with him, and I'm sorry I haven't met the rest of you mosquito guys, but I saw Ian when I first got to England as a young fighter jock with no combat experience, no experience whatsoever. And at my first base, practically one of the first people I ran into was Ian McRitchie. And I don't know how it happened, but he took me under his wing, and he was responsible for a lot of the things that developed into a successful fighter group, the one that I belonged to, which ultimately shot down more airplanes in the air than any other American organization. But Ian came over and took me under his wing and gave me an RAF flying helmet, fixed my airplane up with 2 rear view mirrors. He saw instantly that my big problem was going to be the enemy was coming up behind me instead of the other way. And he taught us how to bore sight our guns. After the initial contacts with him, he kept flying up to see me all the time. And as he told you, he was with Farnborough, which was the experimental RAF organization. And every, I suppose 3 or 4 weeks, Ian would fly in some weird-looking airplane and land and want to know if I wanted to fly it. Of course, all the time he was trying to work out a ride in the P-47, which he eventually rode in mine. But I'll never forget the day that he came in a Sterling bomber, and for those of you who had Royal Air Force experience, this is a big big airplane. And Ian came in flying it all by himself. There was this little bitty guy up there flying a great big airplane. We couldn't believe it. And as soon as he landed and shut it all off, he came over and wanted to know if I wanted to fly it. And I visited him at his home down in West Raynham one time, and he said, there's something going on here that I can't tell you about. And he said, but it's a funny little airplane, and instead of having a propeller, it makes a swishing noise. What they call that thing, a Gloucester Goblin? That little jet?
Yeah, it was a Gloucester F-38, the first jet.
The first jet that England had.
Yeah.
And he couldn't talk about it because we knew nothing about jets at the time. But Ian came in one time with an airplane called the Gloucester Gladiator, and this was a biplane with a big radial engine. And in the early days or latter days of Malta, during the war in the Mediterranean, there were 3 Gloucester Gladiators left in Malta, and they still went off every day to shoot down Germans. And they called them Faith, Hope, and Charity. And I'm not sure, but I think Faith and Hope died, but I don't know about Charity. But we always try to keep Charity alive. Anyway, it was such a joy to find out that Ian was even thought of in coming here. And Virginia told me that he hadn't decided whether he wanted to come, so I called him on the telephone, and at first I talked to his son, and that was a smart move, because I convinced the son, convinced the father that he ought to come here.
And then later, he's out getting passport application forms, because I haven't got a passport.
But then I talked to Ian, and he said he was going to think about it, and I didn't hear anything until you told me that he was going to be here. And it's such a delight to have you here, and to have all of you here for that matter. And I think all of us sitting here tonight would like to go to your countries and see what they look like too. But have you noticed that whenever you get around, well, I'm not sure, Herman, whether this is true, but whenever we get around fighter pilots or people that fly airplanes, they have a tendency to talk more about being shot down than they do about who they shot down. We all have wonderful stories about crash landing and making it out through the underground or getting captured and whatnot. And I don't know, it seems that those stories are much more vivid than the stories of shooting somebody else down. And I'm with him. I recommend that you ought to put in again for that VC and Bog. I wanted to say one or two words to those of you who are interested. The American Air Museum in England is on another fundraising campaign. And this year they're doing it in 2 brackets. One bracket, the bracket last year, said that if you want to go to their dinner, it was going to cost $500 a seat. And of course that automatically eliminated me, because even if I had the $500, my wife wouldn't have let me go anyway. But the aviation community here in Southern California took exception to the fact that that was so exclusive, so they prevailed on the people at Duxford to have something else that was a little more reasonable. And they're going to have their black tie dinner, which is for the big money people, on the 6th of April. And on the 7th of April, they're having a reception at the Museum of Flying in Santa Monica. And the premier person that's going to appear this time is His Royal Highness the Duke of York, and some of you bon vivants will recognize him as Brandy Andy. Anyway, he's going to be here. Sir John Grandy, who at one time was the military head of Buckingham Palace, is also the senior person responsible for the American Air Museum in England. This will be a reception that will last from 6:30 to 8 at the Museum of Flying, and of course, obviously, the fee includes being able to see the Museum of Flying, and that's going to cost $50 per person. And obviously, the majority of that money will go to the American Museum in England. And I think it was very nice of Virginia to allow me to put in this testimony. Some reason or other, and I don't know how the hell it happened, but I got tabbed by the people in that museum, by the Duxford folks, to send out invitations to the aviation community here in Southern California. And I'm in the process of sending out to the Aero Club and to the Daedalians and to the American Fighter Aces Association, and you name it, they're going to get some kind of invitation. So if any of you are interested in getting those invitations. If you let me know, either a calling card or just give me your name, I'll send it to you right away. And along with that is they also challenged me with the responsibility of keeping, I'm in charge of the funds, and as soon as I get enough, I'm going to go visit Ian. And you'll notice your little name cards there. They're beautifully done, and I may prevail on somebody in her staff to do all these name cards for all these people that are going to come to that reception. But anyway, if you're interested, if you let me know or let Virginia know, I'll make sure you get an invitation. And it should be a nice affair. It should be nice, a nice evening. And above all, it's making a contribution to aviation. And I think this is important to all of us who are flyers. We've got to continue to preserve the history that went back into the early days of flying. And I know from my standpoint, Ian, I go to the Smithsonian in Washington once in a while. And there, hanging up, is the first airplane that was flown in our country, and it was the one that Professor Langley flew, the steam-powered kind of model airplane that was flown off of a ship in the Potomac Harbor. And that's the very first symbol of aviation in our country, and I hate to say it, but I go back that far. I can kind of remember that stuff. And here we are going to the moon and going all over the place, and we have been very fortunate to live in that period. And after hearing these stories, we've been very fortunate just to live. Thanks very much. And if you are interested in that Museum of Flying thing, let me know, and I'll get you an invitation. And that disreputable wretch over there, I didn't realize that you had a whole fleet of airplanes and you're still flying. You didn't tell me anything. Here, I was bragging about I have a little single-engine, 4-passenger Piper Cherokee, and I was going to take him flying tomorrow. And he's got a King Air. This is a big kid, sir. And 3 or 4 more, and he's been very quiet about it.
Yeah, Beechcraft. What else do you have here?
An A36?
Well, I had an ultralight and I cranked that 18 months ago.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I showed the photographs out with all the wreckage.
Are you sure that in that crash it didn't damage your head too?
Well, it probably had some effect because it's pretty serious, and yet I managed to drive myself home. Because the wife won't drive the rolls, you see. She drives a Jaguar. And we got the doctor next morning. He put me straight in the hospital. I only stayed there a day and a half. It's a military hospital. The treatment wasn't so good, and they didn't know what they were doing. I got out. I got back home. And careful with my diet, vitamin pills, AC, and need plenty of them. It's the quickest way to help the body heal itself. 8 days after the accident, I'm back at work. But when you see the wreckage, you'll realise 8 days wasn't too bad to get back to work. But my wife put her foot down then. I couldn't fly ultralights anymore. She didn't like them. Now, 6 months later, I found they were building a very good ultralight in Australia. It's like a Cessna 150 with a 4-cylinder engine. And it's all made of fiberglass, and it has a cruising speed of 90 knots. And it's a cabin monoplane, just like the Cessna 150. Seats 2 people. My wife had a look and rather liked this, so we bought it. And we got it back to Melbourne. Then just before Christmas, I bought a second one that was going. So I'm back to 4 airplanes now, which is all right.
Now I'm positive you damaged your brain. Especially with the ultralight. Anyway, thanks for listening to me, and I'm so delighted that you all are here, you guys from down under. And one of these days, we're all going to come and visit you. And then we're all going to tell you our war stories. Thanks, Virginia.